Hi everyone, Joe Kral, President of the Society of St. Sebastian, and again, welcome to Pro-Life University. This week we're going to talk about defunding Planned Parenthood. We've briefly covered this subject in the past, but we really haven't gone into much detail. I talk about this because when you look at the news, for example, there's been a lot of issues surrounding the defunding of Planned Parenthood. And interestingly enough, I want to talk about some of the efforts, especially what's going on in Pennsylvania, where the governor is wanting to fund Planned Parenthood, but obviously the Pennsylvania Pro-Life Federation is working to stop this funding and so forth. And this is an important sort of issue. I think in many ways, when people sort of talk about this issue or get to know the issue, they certainly know it at a basic level. Meaning that, obviously they think, well, abortion is bad and we shouldn't fund bad sorts of things. And at the most basic fundamental level, that's absolutely correct. That is a true analysis. But let's kind of dive into some of the deeper meanings here when it comes to defunding Planned Parenthood and why we ought to defund Planned Parenthood and so forth. Let's first talk about one of the things that I think is very important, and that's the discussion of rights. So this is something I've brought up on many occasions in many of my videos, and I think it needs to be just, again, briefly discussed here. When we talk about rights, all right, so for example, we talk about abortion. And of course, those who advocate for abortion certainly say that there's a right to abortion. We would obviously counter saying that that's not true, that abortion is not a true right. So why is this the case? Why is abortion not a true right? Well, one of the things that we need to fundamentally understand when it comes to issues of legal philosophy and natural law philosophy in general is when we talk about the idea of rights, we are certainly talking about the idea that rights extend from moral duty. So for example, when we talk about the right to life, right, it extends from the moral duty to let innocent people live, right? We have the duty to let innocent people live. We do not have any sort of right, and we certainly don't have any obligation to kill people. And so this is where our right to life derives from, this particular moral duty to let people live, right? And so when we say that there is no right to abortion, this is precisely it, because since there is no duty to kill people or even to help people kill people, right, we don't have any obligation to help provide for killing or anything of that sort. So there's no right to funding. And so in this aspect, we can say that Planned Parenthood should not be funded because in many ways, since it's not a right, it shouldn't have to be funded. The simple reality is that, look, I have no duty to kill. In fact, I have the moral obligation to help preserve the life of innocent human beings, to do my part to help preserve the life of innocent human beings. And we can see this in just everyday sorts of things, So for example, I'm driving in the neighborhood, I've got to drive a safe way. I've got to drive, being very attentive. I got to make sure that I'm not speeding, that I'm going at a safe speed. So I'm not just arbitrarily running over people. I got to be looking around to make sure people are, if they're crossing the street, that I stop and so forth. So, we certainly apply this in everyday sorts of things. So since I have the obligation to preserve life, therefore I have the obligation not to provide for abortion in many cases. So the simple fact is that there's a stronger philosophical, certainly a stronger ethical argument to defund Planned Parenthood. Because why? Because just simply put, since there is no duty to kill, there's no duty to fund. And so we as taxpayers have really the obligation to inform our legislators, our lawmakers, to let them know, hey, this should not be funded. This is an activity that is contrary to morality. It's contrary to the moral code, to the moral law. And guys, we don't need it funded. We need to do what we can to try to defund it. Right? And again, I think this is an important sort of thing, because when we look at funding, right, and especially from kind of a legal / philosophical perspective, if something's funded, it gives the appearance of legitimacy. And the simple fact is, if people think that something is legitimate, they must think it's okay. If the government's going to fund it, they must think it's okay. Well, again, since I've just basically and very quickly disproven that there's any right to abortion, the simple truth is that we've got to make sure that in many ways that funding's taken away, because if we take away that funding, all of a sudden that legitimacy is gone. Right? Now, law as the great teacher, and it's one of the themes that I've certainly stressed on and off on the various videos as well. Law as a great teacher helps us to understand, right, the importance of trying to move people towards a culture of life. And when we can defund Planned Parenthood and the abortion industry, we are doing a great service towards a culture of life. We're helping to educate people away from the acceptance of abortion, that Planned Parenthood is somehow a legitimate organization. The simple fact is in many ways, Planned Parenthood is founded on some pretty heinous things. Not just abortion, but many of us are very much aware of the fact that Margaret Sanger, for example, was highly racist. She was a eugenicist. She did not look fondly upon people of color. And so in many ways, we need to delegitimize this organization that's just been basically founded upon intrinsic evils. And so I think if the government in many ways is able to take away that funding, if you will, that would be a good. Now, we certainly have seen this in many states. My own home state of Texas, for example, this has been an ongoing process for quite some time, because it was firstly incrementally, they would basically step by step take away funds each year until to the point to where it was defunded. In other states, that's the same sort of thing. That's what they did till it was finally defunded. Our prayers are certainly going out for Pennsylvania, and especially for our friends at Pennsylvania Pro-Life Federation, in their efforts in defunding Planned Parenthood too. And I know they got quite a fight, because unfortunately the governor over there is not pro-life friendly. So prayers for you guys, and especially a quick shout out to my friend Maria Gallagher, who's also a 2020 fellow for the Society of St. Sebastian. She's the legislative director for Pennsylvania Pro-Life Federation. A lot of prayers for you. Basically, what it comes down to this is, and we see this, for example, in the Trump administration. The Trump administration's been working hard at trying to find various ways to defund Planned Parenthood, to take away funding from Planned Parenthood. We saw this, for example, with the Title X funding, and I think it was an important sort of step. In many ways, they basically told Planned Parenthood, look, you can receive this funding if you stop abortions. They decided to continue with their abortion, so the funding stopped. And again, I think this is a good way to show how important it is to try to delegitimize, if you will. And when I say this idea of delegitimization, I'm certainly talking from a moral standpoint here, to show that this is not an appropriate sort of thing to fund, that the taking of innocent human life, or an industry or a business in particular, that one of their main goals is to destroy innocent human life, and the most vulnerable human life at that, in the womb, is certainly not something that is worthy of public funding. And I think in many ways we need to do what we can, really across the U.S., across the various states, to pass bills that defund Planned Parenthood, because we don't want an organization that is somehow given any sort of legitimacy, especially when that organization is, reaps the vast majority of their profits from the taking of innocent human life. It's not good. It certainly sends the wrong message to society. So, again, food for thought this week when we think about the various states that are going around trying to defund Planned Parenthood. So, again, I hope you enjoyed this video. This is a little bit shorter than the others. And again, if you like everything that we've been doing, and give us a big thumbs up, subscribe to our channel. We always appreciate it. And again, have a blessed weekend, and God bless.